Hi, I'm Than Bennett. Thank you for listening to The Equipped. Faith Radio podcasts are only possible because of your support. Thank you for giving and for sharing with a friend. George Washington helped lay the foundation. Hey everyone, I'm Than Bennett. I will tell you who said that and why in just a moment. We're also going to talk about headline news, including the knockout stage of the World Cup, earthquakes in Venezuela, and a heat wave in both Europe and the United States. When we come to the end of our time together and we focus on what is beautiful in our world, we're going to be talking about something that is close enough to touch and why that really lends beauty to your world. If all of this sounds a little bit unusual to you, this doesn't quite sound like your regular intake of news, the format in which that is delivered, that's because we do things very differently here at The Equipped. We are a gathering of Jesus followers who come together each week around a newsletter and this broadcast, and we do it to view all things in our world through what we call the lens of the true and the beautiful. And so we intentionally pick divisive stories that might be have a tendency to pull us apart, but we don't consider them unless we first stand on eternal truth, biblical truth from God's Word. And we always close our time after the consideration of those stories by posturing ourselves in beauty so that we can reflect that beauty out into the world. And we really try to make sure that that bracketing makes us consider those headline news stories through a lens that really looks in the mirror first. We want to know what our role as Jesus followers can be in injecting the life-giving and life-changing power of the gospel of Jesus Christ into those stories. There are a lot of different places that you can engage these stories for other reasons, and some of them have their utility. But the purpose of this gathering of the Equipped community is to inject the gospel of Jesus Christ as the hands and feet of Jesus into these stories. And so that's what we're always looking for as we consider these stories, and we will turn our attention to them in just a moment. But we are going to start, as we always do, by standing on truth, and I'm going to return to this quote that we heard recently. They said, George Washington helped lay the foundation. I'll tell you who said it and why they said it right now on The True. So that quote, George Washington helped lay the foundation, it was uttered as our oldest daughter, Brell, and I were touring the campus of Washington College. Washington College claims to be the state of Maryland's oldest college. Now, I will just tell you, there's another school, St. John's, that also claims that mantle. Much of the debate over which one is actually the oldest has to do with whether or not it was chartered before or after America's founding. Washington College was chartered in 1782, shortly after America's founding, and so they sort of self-proclaim that they are Maryland's oldest college. And as we were touring, our tour guide was explaining the significance of what is known as Middle Hall. Now, Middle Hall is one of three buildings that sits on the top of a hill. Surrounded on one side is East Hall, and the other side is West Hall. There are three buildings standing together, and they're the oldest surviving buildings on campus. Now, the significance of these buildings is they were built on the foundation of the original campus building that burned down in 1827. And it is actually probably a little bit unlikely that George Washington actually physically assisted in laying that original foundation in which Middle Hall is built on. But he did make financial donations that made the construction of those buildings possible. And while a bunch of colleges across the country and even internationally actually bear the name of America's first president, Washington College is believed to be the only one to receive his express consent. He gave them permission to use his name in the title. And so as this history was being laid out for us from Middle Hall, we then moved on to some of the newer and really, honestly at this stage, nicer portions of campus. But my mind kept returning to Middle Hall and this idea of building on original foundations. In the physical world, pretty much everything has a life cycle, right? If you think about it, a house has only so long before it's going to need to be rebuilt. Vehicles, certainly, although I would tell you, don't tell that to my 240,000 mile pickup, because if I had it my way, I would get another 240,000 miles out of it. But certainly, the end of the useful life cycle of that pickup is coming. This is true for clothes, laptops, anything that you can think about in the tangible world has a certain amount of time, and then it is expected that the useful life of that product or that thing will be expired. This even makes it our way into tax law. Businesses claim depreciation value for purchases of large assets, and they claim that depreciation over a period of time based on the expected life cycle of that product. But for purposes of the conversation that we're having today, we can really boil it down to this: all created things have a finite, useful life. There will come a moment where all of those created things in our earthly world will run out of useful life. But in many of those cases, the foundation of those created things actually remains viable long after the useful life of the larger item has passed. Now, sometimes this is rather insignificant value, right? You can turn those clothes into rags, or maybe you can get some scrap metal out of a laptop. That might be a stretch. Certainly a vehicle, when the vehicle is no longer useful for its intended purpose, there's some salvage value for the parts, or again for the metal. There's some value in the foundation of that product even after its intended use is expired. Probably the most significant of this, to think back to Middle Hall, is the foundation of a building or a house. If a house burns down, it is often possible to rebuild on that existing foundation. Now, this is only true if the heat was not too intense, if it did not burn down into the ground. But if the fire was above ground, very often that structure can be reused and rebuilt upon. This is true for people too. I think about the famous quote from Sir Isaac Newton that we should stand on the shoulders of giants. We should learn from, we should build on the foundation that was laid by those who have gone before us. Scripture talks about this concept a lot. It talks about how children should build on the foundation from their parents. It talks about how Jesus followers should heed the examples of those heroes of faith that Hebrews 12 talks about as a great cloud of witnesses. These are all examples of people building on the foundation of something that has gone before them. Now, maybe you're like me. I hope this is true for you. I am blessed with a family foundation with a godly heritage. Now, of course, no family is perfect. That certainly includes ours. None of us are without difficulty or flaw. That is true for your family as well. But the blessing of a godly family foundation for those of us that have it is of immense value. And I would tell you this: both people and tangible property benefit when it is possible to build on the foundation of an existing site. I'm sensitive to the fact that some of you listening to the sound of my voice right now don't have that family foundation upon which to build. But as we consider both the pros and the cons, the good and the bad of a foundation that we might be working with to build on for the future, it gives us a new perspective about Psalm 118:22. Think about this conversation about the worth of an existing foundation as you hear these words. Psalm 118:22. The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. The cornerstone of Jesus Christ, the cornerstone of your faith and mine, was rejected by the builders of Jesus' time, the religious leaders of Jesus' day. Now, why did they reject him as the cornerstone of their faith? And really, there's no being cute about this. There's no cutting corners here. The straightforward answer is that they rejected him because he was insisting on replacing them as the cornerstone. Jesus was not looking to build on the foundation of the religious tenets of the day, the religious practices of the day that were carried by those religious leaders. He was insisting that he was there to replace them as the cornerstone. He was saying that it was no longer suitable to build on the foundation that they had established and that they were really the gatekeepers for. It was now mandatory to build your faith on his life instead. It was a radical claim, and it was one that did not go over well for very many people. But my friend, this is so very important. The foundation of your life makes all of the difference, and there is only one foundation that will stand forever. It is the only one strong enough to support all that the enemy will bring against you, and by the way, that includes if your existing family foundation is flawed. Here's the good news today. That foundation, the one that is secure, the one that will last for eternity, it is freely available to you, even if the earthly foundations of your family or your life are in shambles. All you have to do is build on the site that is the rock of Jesus Christ. And by the way, some of this language might be new to some of you who are listening. If it's new to you, but you'd like to learn more about having a relationship with Jesus Christ, I want you to email than@theequippednewsletter.com. It's THANN @theequippednewsletter.com. This is the most important conversation and consideration decision that you will ever make. I would love to have a conversation with you about it. Hi, Faith Radio family. Than Bennett here with a special invitation for you. So much in our world today is screaming for us to be consumed by fear and division and brokenness. But the promise of the gospel means that our foundation is secure. We should live not from a place of fear, but instead our lives should be marked with power and with love and with sound minds. And so every week I'm sending out the Equipped newsletter. Every issue opens with truth from God's Word. From that vantage point of truth, we look at a handful of current events in our world. We do it not to simply consume information, but we do it looking for opportunities for the gospel of Jesus Christ to inject love and healing and redemption into those who need it. We close every issue with a simple reminder of something that is beautiful in our world. I want to invite you to join our community. You can sign up at theequippednewsletter.com. That'll trigger an email back to you. Just click to confirm. Again, it's theequippednewsletter.com. I'll see you there. Group stage is over, and the knockout stage has arrived at the World Cup. It's our leading story this week here on The Equipped. There were 48 teams to begin the World Cup, and after the group stage, there were only 32 standing, and actually several of those have now lost, so we are in the mid-20s as far as number of nations left competing in a sudden death format for the rest of the tournament. There were a couple of surprises early on in the knockout stage. Most notably, Paraguay defeated Germany. It was a major upset. This will continue with each game being a win or go home, quite literally situation, until Sunday, July 19th, when the final will be played at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey. Now, as we zoom out a little bit and think about how we as Jesus followers should interact with this story, first, for those who aren't following closely, when the World Cup was in the group stage, if you won 2 out of 3 games, you were almost guaranteed to advance to the next round. But in this stage, the knockout stage, there's no margin for error. If you win, you advance. If you lose, you literally pack your bags, and in most cases, you fly home. This is going to be true until the very end of this most important tournament for the most popular sport in the world. But as a Jesus follower, if you are living in the United States of America or in Canada or in Mexico, the World Cup provides you with an opportunity to have the nations come to you. And this mandate that we get in Matthew 28 to go and make disciples of all nations, that is coming to your back door. And by the way, I would just tell you, you've got the added benefit of having a beautiful cross-section of humanity as fans from all over the world descend into, at least in my case, into my backyard. It's been a beautiful thing to watch, and including the prosperity, the blessings of America being on full display and enjoyed by those who are visiting for the World Cup. But all nations are coming to us. And so I would just tell you, even if you're not near a game site, these next 2.5 weeks of the World Cup, they are a perfect opportunity for you to consider how to best pursue the mandate of the Great Commission. You live in a world of amazing technological capacity, especially in the communications space. But your assignment, even with all those tools, is still a very straightforward one. Tell the world what Jesus has done for you. It might be win or go home time for the World Cup teams, but your job remains the same. It's to introduce the nations of the world to your eternal home. The death toll is now over 1,700. It continues to climb. This is after back-to-back major earthquakes and at least one significant aftershock in northern Venezuela last week. The initial quakes hit last Wednesday. They measured 7.2 and 7.5 in magnitude. Either one would have been a very significant disaster on its own, but they were back-to-back, just separated by just a few minutes, 7.2 and 7.5. A few days later, on Monday, an aftershock measuring 4.6 shook the region, and it complicated rescue efforts, stalled them out for a minute, and also, of course, shifted the debris that was being searched through. The acting president of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, she, by the way, assumed the presidency after the former president, Nicolas Maduro, was seized by the United States in January. Acting President Rodriguez, she's the one that's going to be responsible for overseeing the rescue and recovery efforts. And after that happens, then some rebuilding will be able to begin. As we think about how to consider this story, we return to a familiar refrain, and it's one that really should be at the forefront of our mind as we live life here on earth and as we consider how we should be carrying ourselves and posturing ourselves with the world around us. And it's simply this: life on earth is both short and fragile. We think about this very regularly, not to be morbid, not to be defeatist, but to remind ourselves of where our hope should be set. Because what is certain in one moment is gone forever in the next. It is just a reality of this temporary home in which we live. And so we come to these reminders regularly. We don't want to be flippant about life on earth. Life on earth is precious. It is something to be cherished. It is something to be nurtured. It is also something to be used. Because your time and my time is short for reaching those who are without a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. And maybe it's a natural disaster like these earthquakes that brings the end of your time or mine. Or maybe it is what we would consider a long life. Even if you live to 100 years old, your life is still short and measured in days. There are so many things. Many of them are important in their own right, but there are so many things that demand and consume your time and demand your focus in those limited days. But only one thing, the pursuit to know God and make Him known, only that one thing truly matters in the end. And so as you pray for those who are hurting, that's a mandate that we have from Romans 12:15. And as you look for ways to lend practical assistance, we find this in Matthew 25. We are to be the hands and feet of Jesus in a natural disaster like this. As you look for ways to do that, I want to invite you to consider anew how you are prioritizing the precious and fleeting commodity of your time on earth. I hope you are gifted a long life. I hope you are gifted a healthy and vibrant life. But even if you are, time is short, my friend, so seize the day. A record-breaking heat wave rolled through Europe this week. There were multiple countries that experienced temperatures well over 100 degrees, and maybe more significantly, they were countries that really are not used to this extreme temperature. It was much farther north than is typical. Both Denmark and Switzerland, for example, set new records for heat, in many cases over 100 degrees, and really in the immediate aftermath of that Europe heat wave, the United States then began to experience the same thing. The Midwest over the weekend and into the early part of the week, and then the East Coast for sure as we are heading into Independence Day. Our family lives on the East Coast, and we are preparing to celebrate Independence Day, the 250th anniversary of America's founding, and we are in the bullseye of the coming heat wave. It is expected, at last I checked, on one of the days to be 115 heat index, but there are about 5 days where the temperatures could soar close to or over 100 with heat indexes well above that. And so as the major urban areas especially prepare for the Independence Day celebrations, they are also preparing to respond to heat-related emergencies in the wake of this heat wave. And so as you think about what you should do with a story like this, in addition to being wise and making sure that you are taking care of your health and preparing to take shelter from the heat where necessary, I would encourage you to look out for and to check in on your neighbors. A lot of times this sounds like a throwaway line, but this is really the core of what it means to carry the Jesus mantle in community with those around you. Now, we as the Equip community, we are largely a digital community. We come together around this broadcast and around a newsletter. It's a wonderful blessing. It is a way to encourage each other and to have iron sharpen iron. But ultimately, the goal of this broadcast and the goal of our community is to inspire you to invest in the physical community around you in a way that spreads the gospel of Jesus Christ and that is the hands and feet in that tangible world. There is nothing that can replace neighbors looking out for each other when something like a heat wave or a natural disaster hits. In those moments, it is the communities that have invested in thick relationship that will thrive, and those that have not will suffer. And so as you and I think about how to be the hands and feet of Jesus in our world, I want you to take a moment now, even if the heat wave hasn't quite reached your community by the time you are listening to the sound of my voice, prepare in advance. Prepare a list of those that you should be checking in with leading up to and during this heat wave. I would tell you that in most cases, just a short phone call or even a text message will be enough just to provide reassurance that if they need assistance, you will be there to provide care and relief. Just that outreach will be enough to make sure that they have somewhere safe to go. So let's together, as we think about this story and as we end our time together and we prepare to posture ourselves in beauty, let's remember the instruction of Jesus from Luke 10:37. This is at the end of the parable of the Good Samaritan. Jesus has told the parable, and he now asks the expert in the law that he's been sharing the parable with to identify the neighbor in the story. And the expert correctly replies, "The one who had mercy on him." Jesus' reply to the expert in the law is the same now to you as it was to him then. It is this: go and do likewise. It's time for the beautiful, and if you don't get the content of the Equip newsletter to your inbox, first of all, you should. You can go to theequipnewsletter.com, add your email address, and you can join our community completely for free. But you can also click on, in the archive section, this week's edition, and you can take in the image provided by my wife, Brooke. She makes this contribution each and every week, and this week's image is of something that is very plain and rustic. But when you zoom in, especially if you're close enough to touch it, you can see the ingrained beauty of this object. And this is true for the stories that we considered this week as well. Many of them included reminders about the need for and the blessing of close-knit communities. We in this community are a digital gathering, right? We gather together around this broadcast and a newsletter to consider these stories. But there is such an importance in investing in relationship with those who are geographically close to you. Just like this image, the tangible beauty in communities and in nature, they lend themselves even more to the observer when they are close enough to touch. And so take in the beauty and the texture of your close proximity world today. Live an embodied life in the midst of it. And in doing so, even those rough-hewn imperfections will reveal surprising beauty. After all, better is a neighbor nearby than a relative far away. I'm Than Bennett. This has been The Equipped, and I will talk to you again next week. Thank you for listening to this conversation from The Equipped. These conversations are available because of your support. Become a supporter now at myfaithradio.com. And please subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes, and share it with friends so together we can stay informed and be equipped to serve.